Well, hello, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast. I'm Tom Rennie. Always a pleasure, never a chore to be with you. Yeah, West Ham didn't lose this weekend. What do you want from me? I'm slightly happier than usual. Tom Henning, some would say. Alongside me for this program, virtually, spiritually, I wish literally, is MLS legend, the incredible, youthful, and zesty Mr. Brian Dunny Dunseth. How are you, mate? You all right?
You know what's great, Rennie, or Henny, to start the show, because Rennie will show up at some point. I know exactly where you're at. I, just a few months ago, was in the same building. I know exactly where those offices are. I know exactly where that seat is. I know that just off your left shoulder, camera right shoulder, but your left shoulder, your other shoulder, is where they do the rugby and they do the cricket.
Yeah.
And so I know, see, Horsey, you just got to get on a plane. Go see Rennie. You'll know exactly where he's at in the studio as we record Week in the Tackle. But I'm excited. We got a great, shut up. You haven't been there. You just act like you've been there.
He was literally here 2 years before you in many ways.
Whatever. He's not there. He's not.
Yeah.
I was there most recently.
Yes.
But by the way,
in many ways, I'm here most recently, aren't I?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You're not first or most recent. In many ways, you're kind of pointless to your own argument here, aren't you?
So did you hear about the weekend, the games?
Well, look, we get new listeners to this podcast all the time. It's Week in the Tackle. Why is it Week in the Tackle? Because we tackle the previous week in the world of football. And before we get into the stories this weekend, I want to talk about the title race. I want to talk about Aston Villa a bit, who we've not touched on almost at all on this podcast or on our programs on Sirius XM FC in the USA. And we probably should, because what's going on there is quite special. Walloping Newcastle at the weekend. I want to talk about Frank Lampard again, what's going on there and all that sort of stuff. But let me tell you this to start with. Now, I am a West Ham fan, Danny. You know this. And this season, I've been to so many games where they've been atrocious. I went to Newcastle last week, and that was hard yards for me. I had both kids for like 10 hours before going, right, I'm also going to go to West Ham Newcastle tonight. So I had maybe the worst day of my year, the hardest working day of my year. At one point, I had one 3-year-old and one 9-month-old screaming and crying on me at the same time, not knowing what to do. And later that night, my team lost 5-1 at home to Newcastle, all right? So I had a ticket for Arsenal this weekend, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to the Man U game soon. I'm going to the Liverpool game. I'm going to go to Palace away. I've got loads of work coming on in the next couple of weeks, covering games for TalkSport and all that. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to take Sunday off. Cleaned out the garage, and listened to the game. I was doing a bit of gardening with my daughter in the garden, and they were actually great. And I'm so annoyed about it because finally there was a performance where they did some of the things that I wanted. Sure, they went 2-0 down first and were diabolical for the opening 20 minutes. But all I want, Danny, from my team, I don't need a team to play the best football. I don't need them to even not get relegated. I just need them to care and to fight and be brave and do whatever they can to win the game. And actually happened this weekend. When I wasn't there. So I'm kind of thinking, should I not go again? Is it me?
It is you. It is you. I was going to point that out to you earlier in the season, but I said, you know what? Let's let Tom Henny show up. Let's not relegate him to Tom Rennie. By the way, yeah, you guys were diabolical that first 20 minutes. You guys were terrible. I was just trying to get on the airplane. I got on the airplane. I was listening to the game on Sirius XM FC channel 157, and then I turned on USA Network as I was on my Delta flight from Detroit back to Salt Lake City with my son Micah after taking in the match or calling the match for Columbus Crew against New England out at lower.com field. They told me to tell you hello. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, listen, it was painful, and I was almost glad you weren't there. And then all of a sudden. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, everything started to fall apart, and they looked dangerous. And I thought Jared Bowen was fantastic. I thought Antonio was running the lines and pulling players apart. I still think Gabriel's the weakness in this back line of Arsenal. I don't trust him, and that's just me from an analytical former center back perspective. He gets into unnecessary situations. He makes it this individual battle. Like, I'm going to eat you, and then I'm going to tweet about it later. And then next thing you know, he's making these really silly, stupid mistakes, getting caught in no man's land for no reason. There was no reason. And listen, I know we'll go back and there'll be pressure on Saka and Bukayo Saka's miss and the penalty. And, it is what it is. It happens. I think the response from him after the Euros and now seeing the response, what we're going to see after this, he'll pick up right where he left off. He's too strong mentally for this to be a moment that hangs over his head for too long. But the reality is This is a big 2 points dropped. And when you look back at these last two games and you know what's coming up for Arsenal, the question will remain, can they handle the pressure? Been so good for so long. Now with kind of this second wobble, the first being kind of February, March, and now we're in April with the pressure of Man City hunting them down, with the head-to-head coming up, with the form that Man City's in. These 2 weeks are leaving some really significant points on the board that could potentially come back to haunt Arsenal and Mikel Arteta, because we're not fully sure, because the litmus test proves that they're good enough, but are they good enough to maintain with Man City chasing them right now, these final, 7-8 games left in the season?
Look, I want to talk about the Arsenal game and City game specifically, because I think both teams showed very similar frailties in these games. I've watched back the West Ham game. I did the commentary of the Man City game on the Saturday, which was a really fascinating watch, actually. And if you are too comfortable, if you're the dads playing the kids and you're like 3-0 up, and then you start bringing on like Granny up front for fun, you might get caught out, which is kind of what happened here. But briefly, I want to mention this. As you know, I'm a radio man, an audio broadcaster. We do visual stuff and all that, but radio commentary is the main thing I've always wanted to do in radio broadcasting. And I've got to just tell you this really briefly about the game. So I couldn't go for various family reasons. Yeah, that's why I couldn't go. And I got in the car for the second half of the West Ham Arsenal game. And I had to get my son asleep. He's 9 months old. He wouldn't go to sleep. It's 3 p.m. We're going for a drive, right? A lot of people listening have been there. I'm sure you have as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I got in the car and I put on BBC Radio 5 Live. Now, I know I'm not allowed to say that because I work at TalkSport, but TalkSport didn't have the game, and our international commentary is quite that, international commentary. I'm not in America, so I couldn't listen to my department. So I put on BBC Radio 5 Live and listened to the game. Now, why am I bringing that up? Because something done it was so magical for me personally, and I thought you might like this now, listeners too. I got in the car and it was a guy called Jonathan Pearce, who is one of my favorite commentators, Jonathan Pearce. I met him a few times, not first name terms or anything, but I meet him at games and often will say, "Hello, I love you." That's all. I once saw him at the Latitude Festival as well, but I won't tell you what he was like at the Latitude Festival after watching, I think it was the vaccines. I'll leave that to your imagination. Anyway, West Ham Arsenal, driving my son about in the car in 2023. This took me back to 1999. At the weekends, my mother used to drive us to the Lakeside Shopping Centre, right? And we go shopping. The family would walk around the shopping centre, that sort of stuff. Keep the kids active on the Saturday. They've been working all week. We've got to do something. We had no money. We couldn't go and do something. You walk around the shops or whatever. And I remember one time sitting in the car park at the Lakeside Shopping Centre in my mum's old Ford Escort, West Ham against Arsenal. Paolo Di Canio scored twice. Neil Ruddock got spat at by Patrick Vieira, who then got sent off in the game. And Jonathan Pearce was doing the commentary. And I'm sitting in the car, parked up with my son this weekend, listening to West Ham make it 2-2 against Arsenal. The same commentator, the same radio station. And back then, I was in year 8 in school, listening to this guy do a West Ham Arsenal game. And there was something quite magical about it, that 24 years later, I'm doing it in the car with my son sleeping in the back, listening to a West Ham Arsenal game on the radio with that same incredible voice. And there's something... this is why I love this entire industry, because Jonathan Pearce is not part of my life. He doesn't come around for Christmas.
Yeah.
His work covering my team, covering that team, just brought me into it so amazingly. And I just had this incredible moment. You've been a broadcaster. There's that brilliant moment where you're like, actually, there's something about this is amazing.
Yeah.
What an incredible lineage of this guy's work to bring into kind of my life, that I sat outside a shopping centre listening to him doing the same game 24 years ago. And now Ramsey's in the back giving me jip all day. But I had a chance to listen to, which I thought was brilliant.
So I've had two moments like that. Number one, I love how you're trying to reset the lights for those that are in the midst of listening just via podcast. I highly suggest head over to our YouTube page, Week in the Tackle. And we're maybe 10 minutes in. And the work office that Tom Rennie is in, if it's motion detectors, so he's sitting, the lights go off and on him. So he has to jump and do star jumps to try to trigger the lights.
News Corp has a budget as well, guys. All right,
Yeah.
We're on a budget here. We've got to keep the lights off when no one's in here.
Yeah, I love it. So I have two moments. Mine's local, JP Dellacamera, the most iconic voice of U.S. soccer for the men's and women's game over the years. And countless games that I had played in Major League Soccer that he had called. And when he finally left ESPN and came over to Fox Soccer Channel during was Fox Soccer before it became FS1, I got to work with him, and he was just a legend. I call him the legend JP. And I can't tell you how many moments I was like, do you want to grab lunch, or do you want to go on a walk? And yep, let's go. Where do you want to go? Let's go for a walk. And it would be like a 45-minute walk. And I would just ask him questions, just broadcast questions, because I was newer in the business, and I had this resource. It would be like the same when I was playing with Colombian international Leonel Alvarez, and I could ask him questions about what it was playing like with Valderrama, or I could be with Alexi Lawless and ask him what it was like, playing in World Cups and going to Italy. And there were just these moments. The other one, and I got to call season games, MLS games with JP on MLS or ES. It's just, I've been so fortunate. So the other one was meeting John Champion. And I think John Champion's phenomenal. I think he does a phenomenal job. And just being that Premier League, FA Cup, kind of Champions League voice here in the States that we've taken the broadcast feeds from England over the years. So when he came over and he started working with ESPN, just a chance to get to meet him, to get to know him. And I'll give you, this is what a scholar and a gentleman John Champion is. When I got the Apple deal and the Apple deal was announced, he sent me a text, and it was such a personal touch text that it was just like top class, just incredible human being. So yeah, John Champion, forever legend. JP de la Camera, forever legend. But to your point, like those iconic voices, those memories, it's like a smell, right? It's like a candle. It's like a song that plays, and all of a sudden, like you're flashing back to this moment in time. That's awesome that you had that opportunity with your son to kind of like recreate what that family moment was for you back then. What would you say, 47 years ago when
Something
you're
like that,
in grade 8? Yeah.
You were still playing for Columbus Crew at that time, I think. You're
about right. Yeah.
Right. Let's get on to some of these games, and let's talk about the Arsenal side of it, the West Ham draw. 2-0 up and absolutely cruising. And the 2 goals they've scored, I think, are poor defensively. We might get to that later. But offensively, certainly the first goal, it's slick, it's beautiful. It's everything that Arsenal have been good at this season. There's a huge line of defenders, so we just pick our way past it, and Jesus is there for a tap-in. The second goal, less, I think, aesthetically pleasing from the build-up, but still an incredible finish by Ødegaard, who's been one of the best players of this season. And then they draw 2-2 and probably should have lost 3-2 with Antonio's header hitting the bar in the second half, and West Ham rampant and massively on top in that second period. Dunny, opens itself up to a pretty reductive conversation that we can have. I mean, I'm not against a bit of lowbrow banter here, but I know we'd try our best to be a little bit better than that when it comes to football analysis. But we can also do screw 'em if we want. But Arsenal, at this point, the reductive conversation is they've blown it. They've blown it. It's over. They've screwed it up. They bottled it, however you want to put it. How accurate is that? How unfair is that? And what did you make to the fact that they were 2-0 up and blew this game, as last week they led and blew it against Liverpool?
Yeah, I don't think the broad stroke, yes, correct, is that they've blown it. The broad stroke is they can't maintain a lead and they're panicking, and the confidence is taking a wobble. That is, it's fair. It's a broad stroke, right? I think in matches like this, when you're scoring 2 goals, I don't care if you're at home or you're on the road, there is, especially these last 2 games at Liverpool and at West Ham, when you score 2 goals away from home against those 2 teams, you think you've done enough, or at least against Liverpool, you feel like you've given yourself to take points. It's different at the Bowl of Disappointment because of the season that West Ham has been having, and you're Arsenal and you're up 2-0. And you're right. It could have been 3-2 with Saka. It could have been 3-2 with Mikel Antonio. Paqueta almost had an incredible goal just out of maybe half a foot away from picking out that upper left-hand corner of Ramsey. And Ramsey was incredible and spectacular with a couple of great saves. This is going to come down to moments. And again, for Arsenal, Southampton at home, at Man City, home against Chelsea, at Newcastle, Brighton, and then away at Forest. The 2 tests are going to be Man City and Newcastle, right? And Newcastle figuring out who they are. A couple of Jekyll and Hyde performances more recently. But it's going to come down to moments. And I think as we probably will see, and this is predicting time, right? Man City will probably win against Arsenal at the Etihad in 2 weeks' time. So where are other points dropped? They've got a 4-point buffer right now. Where are other points dropped? So that's the challenge right now for Mikel Arteta. We know, Amazon, all or nothing, that Mikel Arteta is a phenomenal head coach when it comes to motivation, his motivational tactics, whatever he's doing in terms of his I would say on the field focus, momentum, conversation, tactical approach, nuance, training ground, corner kicks, all of those things. He's going to be literally crossing every T, dotting every I, and making sure the players are as prepared as humanly possible. And that's the effect he has right in the buildup. He picks his starting 11. He can make whatever in-game adjustments he needs to make. And then he's got utilization of the bench to win games or close games out, chase games and score goals, or figure out defensively how to close things up. At the end of the day, though, his control is somewhat minimal because this team, in those fine moments, those fine margins of keeping possession, losing possession, building out of the back, playing direct, winning the first ball, challenging for the second ball. Is it a low block? Is it a high block? And when we're talking about the press, is it Jesus who's starting it, or is it Saka or Martinelli? On the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, where's the physical battles being won? Where are the mental battles being won? I just think all of these fine margins that I just tried to describe is going to determine whether Arsenal wins this Premier League trophy or loses this Premier League trophy. Because the confidence is sky high, but there's still moments where, Tom, I can't figure out if it's a cockiness and a swagger or if it's an arrogance. And I think those are really, again, we talk about fine margins. Those are really fine margins in moments where you give, sorry, Tim, all double birds to everybody, and we're going to win this no matter what. You got the confidence, and you, bro, like it's us. Sorry, Tim. Or is it like, oh, you want to fight? Put him up. Put your dukes up. What do you got? And I think that's where this team has to figure it out. Are you challenging to win? Or are you challenging because you think you're winning? And I think those are the psychological element of that is a really intriguing conversation.
I think it's really interesting. A lot of what you said there, not all of it, but some of it, because I think it's really interesting that if you look at it at the macro of this whole season, and I think there's a really interesting comparison to be had to Newcastle United, 96-97, the famous battle between them and Manchester United for the title. And Newcastle lost 2 games from January through to May. One against Liverpool, the famous Collymore closing in, and one against Southampton the week before. Apart from that, they drew a bunch of games and they won the rest of them. They won the last game of the season 5-0 and were not champions because Man United won it. And they drew with each other, I think, in the penultimate game of the season at Old Trafford, or maybe it was a little bit before that. And I look back to that team and you think, they're the most memorable team of that era for a lot of people. For me as a sports fan getting into kind of football at that time. And they never won anything. But what they used to do was pull it out the fire. They would pull games out of the fire, game in, game out. They'd be close in their game against Derby County. They'd pull it out of the fire. They go to Arsenal. It'd be a tough game, hair 'em, scare 'em, a great Arsenal team. They'd pull it out the fire and get a result. You go back to Arsenal this season, the Bournemouth game. They were outplayed for spells of it. Bournemouth took their chances and maybe could have won it, never mind drawn it. And then, of course, there's that great Nelson goal and they pull that game out of the fire. Dunny, is there a point where you can't keep doing that? That's what relegation teams often do, and they'll pick up an incredible win at Anfield, but then you've got to go into the next game and win it. Everton this season, incredible win against Arsenal. They pull that game out of the fire and get 3 points no one saw coming. They get walloped by Fulham in a arguably significantly more important game. Man City aren't really like that. They do it occasionally, but they don't build a title on that. They win it on kind of games against Leicester this weekend where they cruise into a comfortable position, then shut it down. Quite poorly this weekend, which I want to get to. My question really here is about experience. If you're Man City, you've done this loads of times, you don't allow the game to become end-to-end. You don't allow the game to become too open too often. Are Arsenal guilty of not having enough experience here? Maybe guilty is the wrong word, but they just don't know how to navigate this. And look, Liverpool away and West Ham away, whatever we might joke about with West Ham, they're tough games.
Yeah.
They're real tough game. West Ham need the points and they do raise it against better teams. Always have, always will. So my question is, the macro, how much is this Newcastle? The micro, how much is it? These are just two tough games in a tough league.
Yeah, let's go macro. Yes, again, it's because we're what and listen, Arteta's won something, right? FA Cup trophy, beat Frank Lampard, Chelsea's first year in charge. That gave him sweat equity. What I've and I know I tease a lot about a bunch of different managers, but the respect that I have for Arteta, even though I don't always like his pitch side demeanor, it's kind of irritating. I know if he's yours, you enjoy it, but like he's not mine, so I kind of find it a little bit irritating. But I find a bunch of managers irritating with their pitch side demeanor recently over the last couple of years. What we're watching is a really good team, and a team that deserves to win the Premier League title. A team that has consistently throughout the course of this season proven that they are better than everybody else, and they can get up for the big games and they can win the games that they're supposed to win. Until now. And you go back to February and the wobble that they had, allowing everybody to get back in the conversation, not just Man City, but to allow even Manchester United to be in the conversation for a potential Premier League title winning season.
And what a day that was, Donny. Didn't we all enjoy that 24 hours? It was a thrilling time.
It really was. It was like when Aston Villa was top of the table back in like December a couple of years ago.
It was John Gregory in charge, and it was 1998, wasn't it? So it's not just a couple of years ago. It was another millennium. But sure.
Well, but now it's different, right? So you look at getting, well, at the time Zinchenko was coming back, Gabby Jesus was right around the corner. All of a sudden, the team was firing on all cylinders. You weren't dealing with really that many injury concerns, but you also had Europa League still on the table. So now you got nothing on the table except the Premier League title. And I think there's even that much more emphasis. Obviously, it's the Premier League. Some will say it's more important than anything else. Some will say it's a trophy that everybody should aspire to win. Every single top 6 team should be in the mix with the incredible amount of spending capacity that they have, but it'd also be in Europe as well. And I think what's interesting about this conversation is you've got Pep versus Mikel Arteta.
Yeah.
Like the manager and one of the next up and coming managers. And you also have kind of teacher and pupil kind of conversation. And I remember being critical of Mikel Arteta a couple years ago because he was so adamant, like Pep, that there was a certain way he had to play and there was a certain style that he had to play. But I didn't feel like he had the players to play the way he wanted to play. And I think that's one of the reasons why we saw major hiccups and stutters in the development. But in those major hiccups and stutters in development, we saw them developing. But we're talking about results, right? We're talking about goals. We're talking about wins. We're talking about points. We're talking about securing Champions League spots. And all of those things do matter. But the players at the time weren't matching what he wanted to do. The players most certainly match what Mikel Arteta wants to do. So macro level, Southampton, at Man City, Chelsea, at Newcastle, Brighton, and then at Forest.
Yeesh.
Micro level, tough games. Tough games.
Very tough games. And it's worth noting as well that a lot of people are talking about the fact that Saliba's not playing, Rob Holding is in, didn't have a great game at London Stadium, and they're conceding goals all of a sudden. And, you know, individual quality does matter. Liverpool would not have been champions a couple of years ago without Virgil van Dijk. City, despite their riches and brilliance, would not have won the leagues without Kevin De Bruyne. This season, we could probably say Haaland as well. So, you know, the squad isn't particularly deep. And as ever, it's worth noting that if you want to be champion in England, you've got to beat a country now. And it's a very tough ask. And let me ask you about Man City briefly, because, I mean, I did their game this weekend, and it was such an interesting watch because the first half, I mean, it was so easy. It was staggeringly easy. It was embarrassingly easy in terms of going 3-1 up in 25 minutes. There's John Stones' goal. I know you picked him out recently, how good he's been. The penalty, you know, 5 years ago, you'd have complained about it. This time, this era, it's a penalty all day long. And then Haaland makes it 3 and it's over. Guardiola thought it was so easy here. He thought it was such a cakewalk. And he was right. It was such a cakewalk that he felt perfectly comfortable to take off Erling Haaland at half-time. I know Alvarez comes on, but look, he's not Erling Haaland, as good as he might be. He is happy to take off John Stones, who, again, has probably been their best player in recent weeks, according to many. He's happy to take off Rodri on 53, De Bruyne on 62, and Jack Grealish on 74. This game is such a piece of to Guardiola, sorry, Tim, that he takes off his 5 best players, and not just his 5 best players of recent weeks, his 5 best players on the day. It very nearly allowed this really weak-looking Leicester City team back into it. Tell me a bit about complacency here, because I've always backed Man City, as you know. I continue to back Man City. I don't bet against Pep Guardiola, backed by a sovereign wealth fund at any point. I'm betting on them, as, you know, it built my outhouse. So tell me about it. Tell me about complacency, because Guardiola showed it here and it nearly cost him.
Yeah, well, first off, he's got the tactical adjustments, right? He's going with, you know, whether John Stones is pinching up higher into the midfield, even Akanji at times. This team's flying right now. They're scoring goals. Their capacity to score goals is frightening. It always has been, but it's that much more with Erling Haaland and the addition, and just breaking literally every record, including how much money a player makes a week, something like £860,000. And seems like it's well spent money with the way that he's come in. I would say it's also game management. It's schedule management, Tom, when you're up 3-0 at halftime against Leicester City, that's got nothing to play for. They don't even look interested in the first half. And you're giving Calvin Phillips an opportunity to play some games. God forbid Rodri picks up a knocker and injury. You are bubble wrapping Erling Haaland and De Bruyne as much as you can. And by the way, Cole Palmer looks the part. What a fantastic young little player. I like him a lot, man. I
don't want to disparage these players, but also, if you go out with a team with Manuel Akanji, Calvin Phillips, Cole Palmer, Julian Alvarez, and Sergio Gomez, you ain't champions chasing down Arsenal, right? Good players though they might be.
But 3-0
changes. But
they're not. I know Iheanacho gets that tap in, but outside of that,
no. After that, Iheanacho had another chance where
I know. But I'm saying
it could have easily been 3-3, easily.
Yeah, it could have. Listen, I get what you're getting, Tad. I understand where you're going, and
you don't see it as complacency. You see, they won the game, didn't they? So they got it right.
They win the game. I think it'll force Pep to really think about making those early changes. I think it'll force him to think about who he can trust. I think he's obviously managing the minutes and the legs. This team is not just focusing on the Premier League title race. They're focusing on the biggest thing that they haven't won, which is Champions League.
Yeah.
We'll go back into the narrative, and they're in cruise control right now against Bayern Munich. I know they still have work to do. By the way, at some point we got to talk about Sadio Mane and all these reports that he's not going to be there next year, and Timmy Tickles fined him £264,000 for a punch, which is ludicrous. But all of these things right now for Pep, I think, are big picture. We talk micro level versus macro level. Micro level is managing the legs. Macro level is managing the legs. That's what they're trying to do right now, because he can't afford to lose either of these players. And listen, at halftime, if you're the manager and you've got Bayern next week, midweek, and you're looking at this Leicester City team, and you're up 3-0, Tom, you're making the same decision. You're getting these guys off. I mean, they spent what, 80, how much was Calvin Phillips? Was he 75, 80 million?
Yeah, I think 60, but yes.
Okay, so 60. Hasn't looked the part. Doesn't look, looks competent enough, but doesn't look the man. Yeah, it doesn't look like a Man City player.
Yeah.
And then it's up for a couple of kids to get a run. So yeah, I think more than anything, it's not complacency. It's sorry, Tim. Probably shouldn't do that again.
Yeah.
Because
that's the definition of a let-off.
Yeah.
Doing that is a definition of a let-off. Listen, I want to move on to a load of other stories, Danny. There's so much to get through here, but I think it was worth doing the title race first, because, again, they meet each other on the 26th, 27th. If you're listening outside the UK, it's available to TalkSports International listeners. If you're in America, it's on Sirius XM FC. Going to be fantastic. Make sure you listen to that game. Watch it if you can.
But by the way, really quick on that note, Arsenal plays Southampton, then they go to Man City.
Yeah.
Man City has Bayern away, Sheffield United in the FA Cup, at Brighton, and then they face Arsenal. So significant, we talk about managing games, significant amount of games for Man City compared to Arsenal in the build-up to this game.
2 other competitions, 2 games in hand, not many days to do it, and a Champions League to win. Absolutely right to highlight that. Who wins it? Quickly, one word.
Man City.
That's 2 words. I agree, though. Let's move on to a couple of other stories. I did want to touch on this. We won't do the deepest of dives today, but I did want to get your view and give mine on Aston Villa. I'd love to ask them because I went to watch them recently in the West Ham game at London Stadium, a result that's actually looking quite creditable now for West Ham if you look at the other results that Villa have been getting. And just really, really impressive. Won each of their last 5 Premier League games, their best run since under John Gregory, second mention in this podcast back in 1998. Remember the start of this season, they were in the relegation zone or thereabouts when Steven Gerrard was sacked. The players they've brought in going to the first team for this weekend, it's not substantial or significant who has been brought in under this manager. He's come in, taken Steven Gerrard's group, added Moreno at fullback. I think Dendoncker came in January, so he might be an Emery, but I think he may have been there previously. Either way, beyond that, it's still the core of what Steven Gerrard couldn't get a tune out of. Yep. And even to the point what Dean Smith, having done a really good job, had stopped getting a tune out of. This manager comes in, and I went to the West Ham game recently, and I just remember being so impressed by his in-game tactical tweaks. So in that game, he had Moreno at left back, destroying, I know he's diabolical, but it was destroying Thilo Kehrer, who was totally exposed at fullback. There was no cover. And Emery, you could see him. You're watching him constantly getting an overload on this left-hand side. That's where the player is. That's where the space will be. That's where the goal will come from. I did the commentary of Chelsea Aston Villa fairly recently. It was Graham Potter's final game, and it was evident one is a European class manager. One is a manager who's lost his way. Well, whatever quality Graham Potter has got, we'll talk about that, I'm sure, when he comes back to football next year. But Dunny, the constant tweaks of this team, coupled with the evident motivation of these players, coupled with how many times did we have the conversation? Who's Villa's best striker? Danny Ings or Ollie Watkins? One week it was Ings, 1 week it was Watkins, 1 week it was Ings and Watkins. And he's come in and gone, well, it's Watkins. Good, thank you, Danny. You're a good player, but thank you. You've got to go. This is my striker. And it's now goal after goal after goal after goal. A thrashing of Newcastle this weekend. And it really was. 3-0 the scoreline, could have been worse. Ramsey, Watkins with 2. The form's incredible. They've beaten one of the best teams in the country this season. They've rampaged to 50 points in the league. Only 3 behind Tottenham, 6 behind Man United. Yes, they played 2 more than Man United, but it's still worth noting it for the amount of games left. Talk to me about Unai Emery. Yeah. Talk to me about the importance of the coach. Does this, Danny, this might be a good way into this conversation. Does this show us what a coach does, the importance of a coach? And as much as the players are more important, if you've got a great coach who knows what to do and the players believe in him, this is what can happen.
Couple things. Excuse me. There's a fascinating subplot in here for a locker room perspective. I know I talk about the locker room quite a bit, and we usually just focus on the 90 minutes between the white lines every single weekend. But think about this as a locker room. A guy like Steven Gerrard, who's been there, done that, achieved everything that a footballer you would hope to achieve as a player, domestically, international, all that, walks in the door. That's your new manager. Doesn't work out for obvious reasons, right? It's about results. But you just think about the culture of the locker room looking at Steven Gerrard as a player versus listening to him as a manager. I told you that story about Jurgen Klinsmann at LA Galaxy in 2000, I think it was like 2002, 2003.
Where he would come on the training pitch, for those that missed it, and be the best player on it and say, just do that.
But he was doing it as a coach, right? And was just running a session. And he's like, well, no, you play the ball here, and then you get this, and you make this run, and then you do it, and bop, top corner. And no one else could do it. Because he was
have you tried being brilliant? Have you tried doing this guitar solo?
Yeah, just do this. He's fucking Jurgen Klinsmann. Sorry, Tim. No, I'm cursing a lot today.
You're Chuck Berry. I've not tried that, Chuck. I've not tried it. No.
Yeah. So then you think about Unai Emery coming in. And for the runs and success he had at Sevilla, I know Spartak Moscow, money grab, whatever. You take away Villarreal, but you think about Sevilla, gets him the job at PSG. PSG and I'll say then to Arsenal subsequently. The only maybe the only, I don't want to say negative criticism we can have, maybe it's constructive criticism, is learning how to manage big players. And you think about that locker room at PSG, disaster, and it's always been a disaster. I don't care who you've asked to manage that team. It's been a complete disaster managing the personnel.
He did win the league.
How could you not win with that group? I mean, the league, see, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time, but PSG winning the league is like, that's not the point. The point is to win Champions League. That's always been the narrative from day one. To Arsenal, you think about the name, you think about the time that he took over Arsenal, the David Luiz's, and think about trying to figure out what to do with Mesut Ozil. Why do I keep saying that? Mesut Ozil. That's like Tom Henny and Tom Rennie. Mesut Ozil.
And a great joke now that no one gets because you said someone's name wrong. Is that what this is going to be?
We're just going to flip it around. Mesut Ozil. And remember, for that time, it was like, he's got a cold, or he's sick, or he's got back problems, or it was just like, no, he's being a at training, allegedly. Sorry, Tim. And he's not playing well, and he won't fit into the system. Now he's got a team, and this goes into the constant conversation, I think, that we're talking about managers. Does a manager make a team better? Is a manager developing players? Is a manager making the individual players within the collective better? Unai Emery's doing all of this right now. He's taking a team that was failing and is making them not only a really sound, solid team on both sides of the ball. Now they've got a little bit of swagger. Now they got substance, they got style, they got identity, they got games that they're winning, they've got goals. Ollie Watkins looks like one of the best Premier League strikers. One of the best Premier League strikers. He's flying. I've always liked him. But he's that much better. He's running the lines, he's physical, he's intelligent, he's scoring goals left, right, and center. I just think we can't say enough about what Unai Emery's doing right now. But I got my schedule. Got my little scheduled. See, I do this. I write it down. I got my schedule. Aston Villa away at Brentford, home against Fulham. And then you ready? Hold on to your shorts, Horsey. At Man United, at Wolves, home against Spurs, at Liverpool, home against Brighton, at Newcastle, away against Fulham to end the season. We're singing their praises right now.
Yeah.
But holy Christ in a handbag. This is a lot of big time games and a lot of difficult games coming up for Unai Emery.
It is, though. However, in some ways, that might be a good thing, because if they finish the season playing Leeds, West Ham, Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, essentially those games will mean nothing. And even if you win those games, your opponents are winning their games. It doesn't matter. If you're playing those around you and you've got yourself in this form, I saw a bit of data analysis the other day which said Aston Villa statistically had the toughest run-in of any team in the country. However, if you're Villa now and you've gone from trying to stay in the league to we're going to have a nice mid-table finish, keep your powder dry in January, invest in the summer, build an Emery team, to, wow, hold on a minute, this is on here.
We got Europe. Yeah.
I think that's what you want. I actually see that as a massive positive for Aston Villa as opposed to a negative, because they've gone from nothing games and nothing else to play for to suddenly they're all, to use that sweet cliche, cup finals. They are suddenly all very, very, very important games, making it very tough for everyone else around them to secure their positions. And right now, the way they're playing, they're the form team in the country. Only them and Man City are on equal winning runs. And if I'm any of those teams, if I'm Tottenham Hotspur, with my silly nothing manager going into a game against Unai Emery and Aston Villa, I'm thinking it's over. I wouldn't back Tottenham Hotspur in a month of Sundays right now to beat Aston Villa in that game. And they win that game. And if they both win all their games, which again, I don't see as feasible, but let's say theoretically they do, Villa go level on points above them, and they're turning around that goal differential. They get above them. Then they start having a sniff at Manchester United, who are not going to win every single game.
No.
They just won't. They're not good enough to win the remaining 9 games in a row, plus another competition to be in, maybe 2 other competitions. So there are gaps in that market there for Aston Villa. So I think that is a lot more of a positive than originally painted. And I wouldn't want to face them right now. I'm just happy we got that draw a few weeks ago and we can move on to that. And just really briefly, I want to move on, but on Villa, I was watching them at the weekend, and I've got some friends that are Villa fans. One of them in America might be listening to the podcast. He usually does. Hi, Dan. And I was watching the game, and I just thought, how great would it be if we get to the end of this season and Aston Villa and Newcastle have qualified for the Champions League, and Brighton and Brentford have qualified for the Europa League, and Fulham are in the Conference League. Because in other countries, Spain, you might get Betis or Sevilla or Valencia. In Germany, you get Leverkusen and Borussia Mönchengladbach, because there's only one or a two or a three. The Champions League spots are available and the Europa League spots are available. And I think to myself, West Ham have been in Europe for 2 years running for the first time in 20-odd years. I got to have a great day watching them away in Bucharest. I got to go to the quarterfinal and the semi-final of the Europa League, home games though they were, the Sevilla match. I'll never forget beating Sevilla. Whereas Man United played Sevilla recently, and yes, there's a story to it, but next year they'll be like, who did we play? What happened? Who we play next year? Because that's just the way it is. For West Ham fans, this has been incredible. For Villa fans, it'd be amazing. And I'd be so pleased for all of them to go into it and love it, as opposed to Liverpool fans who will go into it and just bitch and moan about the fact the old days were better. This is what it's meant to be all about. So everyone who cares about football, I know that Newcastle are the public investment fund of Saudi Arabia, and I know it's all American and Egyptian billionaires at Villa, but still, think of those poor people that had to stuff for the Championship and Steve Bruce 3 or 4 years ago, and have now got this incredible opportunity, and hope that Chelsea and Liverpool and Tottenham don't make it. Screw them! Let's move on to Chelsea. I do want to ask you about that. Firstly, I saw a great tweet from the Athletic journalist Adam Crafton this week. I haven't got it in front of me, but basically he says, how come I feel like I watch Brighton every week, and every week they introduce a new player that I've never heard of before that's world class, or words to that effect. And I thought it was brilliant, because Julio Enciso. I have never heard of Julio Enciso. I'm sure I have, but not to the point where I can remember him. And that goal, I mean, as pure as a baby's first cry. Just wow. What a moment that was. It was fulfilling to see it go in, because Brighton, I mean, there's domination of a game. And then there's what Brighton did against Chelsea this weekend. Chelsea scored a shonky, horrid goal by Conor Gallagher, but they were wiped off the park by Brighton. And there was a feeling, with me at least, Danny, that it would have been wrong for the sport of football for Chelsea to have got anything from that game. And so for that goal to go in, a 19-year-old Paraguayan that was not a Q2 sign, scoring a goal like that, it's almost only a vindication of Brighton's business model.
Yep.
It's a vindication of the way they play football. And it shows you right now, and again, I think this is the narrative of this weekend. I do want to get to Bournemouth, and we spoke about West Ham briefly as well. This weekend showed you which clubs have a team and can get a team performance, and which clubs do not have that. And right now in the Premier League, as we speak, that's what is making the difference for teams. And it was just brilliant, I thought, from Brighton. What did you make of it?
Yeah, there's such a bigger story here than just this game, because I think this game tells the story of De Zerbi and Brighton and their model and their scouting network, and this team playing so well. But the subplot to this story is obviously Boehly raiding Brighton at the start of the season, unbelievable amounts of money, and seemingly picking all the wrong players from Brighton, picking all the wrong coaches from Brighton, picking all the wrong staff members from Brighton. I mean, because that's essentially what he did, right? He came in and he raided the club for the people that he wanted to bring to Chelsea, thinking that, oh, well, the model's been incredible. These are the guys. We'll just take the stability that has been built here at this club and we'll move it on over to Chelsea. And that's obviously not happened whatsoever. So there's a bit of purity in this result, that Brighton can go to Stamford Bridge and put in this type of performance and walk away with this type of result. And I was wondering, by the way, when the fans at Stamford Bridge were going to start to turn on Boehly. Yeah. And I felt like this was the game where all of a sudden Boehly's looking up, fans are looking down, giving him the verbals, giving him the abuse. And now the report's coming out that Boehly went inside the locker room and said afterwards that these results are embarrassing and how much money I've spent. And I wanted to create a winner and you guys aren't winning. And I don't know if it's a dressing down or a pep talk ahead of Real Madrid, but everything that he's doing seems to be wrong. right now. Just seems to be wrong. So to see what Brighton, I got no skin in the game for Brighton. They're a fun team to watch. I've been telling you for the last 2 years, I really enjoy watching them play. They are what we were talking about a couple of years ago with Burnley and Bournemouth under Deitch and Eddie Howe, and seeing what they're doing now, they're a real pain in the ass to deal with because they're fun to watch.
Right? This is way above anything Bournemouth Burnley did. This is some of the football, some of the
it's different football.
It's mind blowing. Some of it, it's so incredible. And you know, I have a soft spot for Brighton. As you know, I lived there for 3-4 years. I went to university there, and if it wasn't for the fact that West Ham have not beaten them in 13 years, I'd love them to go on winning. But hopefully they get relegated and we don't at some point. But they're incredible to watch, and they were incredible in this game.
And by the way, lost 2 players in the first half. Like, let's not undervalue that. Losing Ferguson, losing Veltman. Yeah,
Evan Ferguson has been incredible, and he just hit the bar and then goes off, and that guy signed a ting. Our friend Danny Welbeck comes on. I was just as good and scored again at Stamford Bridge, second year running. On the Chelsea thing, the Boehly thing, I think, is extraordinary. Going into the dressing room is extraordinary. Frank Lampard says he's not got a problem with it, but frankly, who cares about what he thinks? I just wanted to read you this. This is Frank Lampard's last 17 games as a manager. And it goes through Everton and Chelsea, of course. Here we go. Lost 2-1, lost 2-0, lost 1-0, lost 2-0, lost 2-1, lost 3-1, lost 4-1, drew 1-1, lost 2-1, lost 3-0, lost 4-1, lost 2-0, drew 0-0, won 3-0, lost 1-0, lost 2-0, lost 2-1. So that's Frank Lampard's last 17 games in management across 2 clubs. Look, I almost feel sorry for him. I don't have the conversation again that we've had a couple of times about what the point of Frank Lampard going there is. But if you're Enzo Fernandez or you're Mikhailo Mudryk, or I don't know who the leaders are in the Chelsea dressing room, I'm not sure they know. If Todd Boehly comes in and says that, wouldn't you say to him, well, I signed for Thomas Tuchel, who won you the Champions League, and you canned him. I then started playing for Graham Potter, who you were backing for a 2-year project, and you sacked him. And then you give me this clown who's got 1 win in his last 17 games in management. Yes, he should be working the lounges, and yes, he's a club legend. But the proof is in that sweet Lampard pudding, and it tastes like defeat. So why have you given me this guy to work with? Why did someone say that to Boehly? And if they didn't, why didn't they? And if they didn't, are they on the phone to their agent saying, I can't stay here. This is not a serious club. And if I'm Enzo Fernandez, I've got every club in European football, if not world football, trying to sign me. Why am I at the Chelsea midfield when, you know, Arsenal are looking at buying Declan Rice from West Ham? Why are they not trying to buy me? Why am I here and not there? You'd sack your agent, wouldn't you?
Well, the agent got him £105 million move in January after being bought from River Plate by Benfica for 10 million, less than 7 months earlier. By the way, what is it? Minute like 50. Rennie's doing it again. He's trying to.
I'm waving and it's not turning on. I don't know what else I meant to look.
Star jump. Star jump. Do the goalkeeper star jump.
There you go.
Goalkeeper star jump for the win. By the way, not for nothing. It's so much fun to text former counterattack producer Andrew Williams in the 56th minute as the hockey line change of Hakim Ziyech, Joao Felix, Mateo Kovacic, Reece James. It's your turn. Enter the field. a four-man substitution window in the 56th minute of Ziyech, Felix, Kovacic, and Reece James. This is a Boehly situation. Yes, this is a Frank Lampard situation. Yes, this is a rudderless ship going in no direction. But I'll tell you, I'll say this one more time. And by the way, you're leaving Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang on the bench when you need a goal. At some point, we have to acknowledge the very real possibility of this disaster of a season, dependent upon who's hired as the next manager of Chelsea, one hell of a spring back year. Because the depth of this roster and the quality of this roster absolutely can challenge for a Premier League title if they get the right person in charge. But by the way, like the reports this morning before we recorded the podcast, Luis Enrique wanted the job, that he wanted to take over immediately. I mean, you've got a gajillionaire playing at the joystick's control of Chelsea Football Club, not knowing what he's doing, spending crazy amounts of money, and hasn't even advanced past level 1 right now.
Yeah, and he's hired the mascot to be the manager. Let me ask you about Bournemouth. We've not got a great deal of time for the Fighting Cherries, but I do want to bring them up because I've been saying this now for some weeks that
You have?
they're not going to be relegated. And why they're not going to be relegated? Attitude, attitude, attitude. I don't want to discount the talent of Philip Billing and Dominic Solanke. I'm not dismissing it, though I would say on the whole, and I stand by it, it is not a Premier League quality squad. So again, the job that Gary O'Neill has done there to get them where they are is fantastic. The victory over Tottenham this weekend, again, there's an element to football that I think we appreciate more from the outside than the inside. That when you are in the inside and you can kind of feel that momentum as Villa are, it must be absolutely magical. But there's a thing about Bournemouth where they ain't having it. They are not having it. They will not be. Gary O'Neill has got this team to a position where the concept of relegation disgusts them. The thought they might have a relegation on their CV makes these Bournemouth players physically sick. I wouldn't be surprised to find out there'd been a Clockwork Orange thing going on. And Gary O'Neill has had his players strapped into a seat, watching video after video of Norwich City getting relegated and Watford getting relegated and teams that have finished bottom and Derby and Sunderland. And they're watching it whilst listening to Wagner as loud as possible and Beethoven being pumped into the air inside the training complex. Because I genuinely believe that if you said to a Bournemouth player, you might be relegated this year, I think they'd vomit all over your shoes. Their desire to be in this league is off the charts, astronomical. And if you look at some of those other teams, I don't see that at Southampton. I don't see that at Leicester City. I am not seeing it right now at that ragtag group of mercenaries in Nottingham Forest. We have not seen it enough for Everton, certainly under Frank Lampard. We saw it a bit with West Ham, Fulham game, Arsenal game. I think I saw it. We saw it for the first time this season. We saw them go, I'm not having this. We've got to get some results. You've seen it recently with Wolverhampton Wanderers too, and certainly Roy Hodgson's Crystal Palace. You know, Dunny, we haven't got a great deal of time for it, but that desire to not go down, that desire to win, that desire to take your chances leads them now to 33 points after 31 games. Their next group of games are all against teams around them. West Ham on Sunday, what a fixture that is at the Vitality. Then to Southampton, who might even be relegated that day, the way results are going, and then Leeds at home. They could be over 40 points at the time we reconvene for May and the 4 games in May, which were meant to be the deciders. And Danny, I mean, maybe you think differently to me, but I'm just so, how do you get that? And that's what it is, right? They got it because they just are not having relegation. And I love that about them.
We were talking about this 4 weeks ago. There were 4 points, that separated Crystal Palace from Southampton on 23 points. And they've taken 9 points out of 12 points available. I don't think they're fun to watch. I don't think they're exciting to watch. I think based on the names on the back of the jerseys and the performances, that they were looking like they were doomed to go down, or at least were heavily in the mix to go down. And rightfully so. They're sitting on 24 points. I agree with you. Everything you said. It is just grit, sheer grit, determination, and double birds left and right now. And I think that you are watching a team that their mentality is far outweighing what their physical ability is possible of doing over the course of 90 minutes. And sometimes it just comes down to a battle. And I think right now they're up for the battle. So it'll be one hell of a fun team to watch. Even though you talk about the eyeball test, are they that exciting? They're exciting enough that they're going to compete in every single second of every single match that's available to them until that final whistle blows on the final day of the season.
How are we effective in what we've got? And that's the thing that Gary O'Neill has done. That's the thing that great coaches do. And that's the thing that players can achieve when they believe in the coach and they start getting the results. And, you know, no one saw Dango Utara being the hero of Bournemouth when he came in January, but that's exactly what he was. And we won't do Tottenham today because I think we've done it at length recently and nothing has really changed. But everything as predicted is coming to fruition. And Davinson Sanchez, by the way, get your coat, mate. This sport isn't for you. Relegation battle also getting to a position where we predicted it too. That there was 10, there was 8, there's probably 6 today. West Ham, Leeds, Everton, Forest, Leicester, Southampton. Next week, I think if West Ham win at Bournemouth to 33, I don't think Leicester are going to get 33. I don't think Southampton will get 33. That puts you then just trying to pull away from Forest, Everton, Leeds. We're recording before the Leeds-Liverpool game. If Leeds have won it, they go to 30. I think they're one result away from not being caught by two of them. And it's going as we kind of thought it would, Dunny, that everyone always talks about. It's never been like this before. There was more teams in it with 10 to go.
Yeah.
It's always like this. And when we get to 5 games to go, there's usually 5 teams in it. We might be in that scenario. And I kind of think it's going to be, like most people do, the current bottom 5, but we shall see. Bournemouth-West Ham is going to be a huge game next weekend, as is Leicester-Everton coming up in 2 weeks' time, I think. 2 final bits, Danny. Firstly, MLS, where have you been this week? You were at Columbus Crew. My boys, again, looking good.
Yeah, sorry, I was yawning because I've had so many flights recently where I'm getting up at like 4 a.m. I took Micah, my middle boy. He turns 11. Actually, today, as of recording, is 11 years old. He got to. Yeah, he's having fun, man. So I took him out to Columbus. He got to pick a game. He wanted to go to the Columbus game because I played for Columbus and I played for New England Revolution. That was the game. It was Columbus Crew against New England Revolution at lower.com field. Shout out to Wade Nielsen. He listens to Week in the Tackle. He heard last week that we were heading out there, so he added a surprise to Micah. We got to go see the Columbus Blue Jackets, that's NHL hockey, against the Buffalo Sabres on Friday night. So I got to surprise him with tickets. Great tickets. We were maybe like 5 rows up from the glass. We got to see. We went to a fight and a hockey game broke out. That's what we joke around in the U.S. It was fun to watch. Great atmosphere. I hadn't been to a Blue Jackets game since I played for Columbus, but we stayed downtown, had a blast. We went around the city, got him some gifts. Went to the Crew New England game. Performance-wise, New England was fantastic. They made it incredibly difficult for Columbus and Wilfred Nancy to do what they normally do, which was style and substance-based possession. They got the goal. And then in the dying moments, a bit of controversy. New England goes down, a red card in about the 65th minute. Barrero stupidly gets a second yellow after mouthing off to the referee and getting an unnecessary yellow to begin with. And then there's Rennie, this was a really fascinating one. There was a shout for a handball on Andrew Farrell. He goes up for a header, his arm's extended, it comes off of his arm. And it's about 2.5 minutes around that where Chris Penso's having a conversation with VAR, and they're looking at all the angles to try to judge if it should be a penalty in favor of Columbus. They end up not suggesting referee go take another look at the monitor. He didn't call it in real time. So about 2.5 minutes, right? So there was 5 minutes shown by the fourth official. We're getting to like 97:30. There's like a buildup for New England. Ball goes out. Bruce Arena and his coaching staff are literally talking to the fourth official, asking how much more time, and they had asked how much time was added on for the VAR check. Whatever the conversation was, there was one last buildup that the referee, Chris Penso, allowed Columbus to have. Ball ends up getting served in. Zelarayan finds Zawadzki, a homegrown kid, scores his first MLS goal, game-tying goal, dying moments. Literally, Bruce and his staff are losing their mind because they felt like the added time on top of the 5 minutes shown, that whistle should have been blown. Penso gave one last opportunity for the home side in the momentum of the possession. As soon as the referee blows for kickoff, he immediately blows the final whistle. So literally, it was the last play of the game. So New England, big 3 points, incredible performance, ends up whittled down to just 1 for Wilfred Nancy and company. Whether they deserved it or not, that's up for debate. Was it cruel? Unfortunately for New England, absolutely it was. But points split for 2 of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. So great game overall. And then Mike and I jumped on a plane yesterday morning to fly home, and now he's at school celebrating his birthday with all of his friends.
I did notice at Lower Field Stadium.
Lower.com field.
Lower.com Field Stadium.
Not stadium, just lower.com
Such
field.
a bad name. Such a bad name.
It's money, man.
That's worse than London Stadium, significantly
so.
Why not call it the Olympic Stadium? Anyway, I did note that it was back to the 90s night.
It was.
What does that mean for you? Did you have to go dressed as Michael Jackson or something?
So they had a lot of like the old like Oakleys, like the big full face Oakleys, and like a lot of people had like long hair.
Come on,
yeah.
Be honest.
But it was fun. Like what they were doing was a lot of like flashback montages, as well as like they were showing movies from the 90s and bringing fans on the field like during halftime and having them finish the sentences of the iconic movies. There was like shots of like Alf and all of it. But yeah, I mean, it's what's I was actually saying this with Max Brados, my partner for Apple TV. You know, each team because we're talking about such a short timeline that these clubs have been together, as they've kind of created kind of their own cultural significance within the community, they've added these pieces. And so Columbus was like the three hard hats with the workers. And, they add, if you go to Portland, it's Timber Joey and he's got the chainsaw. If you go to Atlanta, it's the Golden Spike and they're smashing the Golden Spike. All of these cities or teams are creating kind of their own little cultural significant moments that then they're building into the club culture in the city dynamic. So it's I know from the outside looking in, MLS is such a new league and it doesn't have roots the way like Liga MX has roots in Mexico or the Premier League has roots for the history of the game in England. But to kind of see these kind of like little things, additions added where people are like buying in and having fun. I think it's just, it's good to see kind of the community supporting the club and then the club figuring out ways to kind of have fun and support the community.
And the traffic go pretty wild this weekend as well. LAFC continue their domination of the city.
Yeah. Great game last night down at LA Galaxy. Again, the LA Galaxy usually have a really strong, loud support inside the stadium, but they're not happy with the president, Chris Klein. They're not happy with kind of the direction of the club. They're not happy with, listen, the reality is they're really jealous in seeing what LAFC has built in such a short amount of time. And when you talk, and we talked last week to Alexi Lawless on Grumpy Pundits, channel 157 over on Sirius XM, hear that from 7 to 10 a.m. Mountain Time. That still the LA Galaxy is the super club. It's the reference point. It's David Beckham's club. Even though LAFC has totally taken away the real-time momentum of the Battle of Los Angeles because of the stadium, because of the black and gold, because of 32-52, because of winning an MLS Cup trophy, the vibes are all, and being downtown, the vibes are all with LAFC. Heading down the 405, more of a beach community / like traveling feel for LA Galaxy now. There's a real pushback, and the support of 32-52 at LA Galaxy was extraordinary. They were loud, they were rambunctious, they brought it as they always do. But when you're talking about right now, there's kind of like, I guess it's a sound out. I don't know how better to explain it, but the fans are not showing up that are like the really, really loud, rambunctious, boisterous supporting fans on behind one goal, behind or to the side of the other goal. Just the fan bases, they're really joined right now, 5 of them, saying that the supporter groups that until we see significant progress, until we see significant change, we're just not going to allow our voices to be heard. And they're doing that, and it's making a really big dent in the atmosphere at LA Galaxy. So the president, Chris Klein, came out with a letter saying that if objectives aren't met, which I assume are making the playoffs this year for the LA Galaxy, that he will step aside. So we'll see how it all plays out, but it's not good for Greg Vanney. It's not good for the LA Galaxy players. It's certainly not good enough for the fan base for the Galaxy, as they're seeing kind of 2 teams go in different directions right now in Southern California.
So if you want your boss you don't like to leave, all you got to do is lose. What an interesting proposition that is at LA Galaxy. We'll see how it works out. Look, we're out of time. We were going to do a Tim Talks Balls, but I think we can save that for Friday's show. So if you subscribe to the program, you get our Friday additional program when we're together on Friday for our Sirius XM show, where we're going to look ahead to the weekend. And we also like our reviews as well. So send us a review, make it funny, and we'll get Danny or I to read it out on the program. We always enjoy ratings as well, as high as you possibly can wherever you do your ratings. And you're going to get a Tim Talks Balls on Friday, which we can all agree is a very sensual proposition. I'm Tom Rennie, that's Brian Dunster. Tim Horsey produced the program. We'll see you next time. All right.